Many thanks for joining us on The Square. Sincere apologies for starting a little behind schedule. The Nigerian government has approved the 2022 to 2026 action plan for the promotion and protection of human rights in the country. According to the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, the approval followed the Buhari's administration's compliance with National Human Rights Commission, NHRC's judgment and payment of 135 million naira compensation to victims and family members of the Apo 6 killings. He also said the policy was intended and targeted at consolidating and upscaling the Nigerian observance of the human rights posture in view of the successes and achievements of Nigeria as it relates to human rights under the current administration. In his words, to quote his words, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has established a record of being the first and only administration in the history of Nigeria that has indeed tolerated, accommodated, and enforced the decision of the Human Rights Commission, end of quote. For context, the Apo 6 were a group of friends killed by a team of police officers on patrol on June 7, 2005, as they drove home from a nightclub. All 6 friends had been spare parts dealers at the Apo Auto Spare Parts Market. The killings triggered public outrage, forcing the then president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, to set up a judicial panel of inquiry to investigate the horrific incident. It's been 18 years. Is this justice? There are still questions about the controversial acquittal of Danjuma Ibrahim, then Deputy Commissioner of Police, at whose alleged instigation the killings occurred. Is Nigeria really on track in promoting and protecting human rights? That's our focus on The Square. My name is Felicity Ezewike, and joining me are 3 gentlemen. From Abuja is former director at the National Human Rights Commission, Lambert Opara. In Lagos, we have human rights lawyer Festus Oguns and senior associate, Pitchstone and Grace LP, Steve Nwabweze. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on The Square.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. So let's start with understanding what the National Action Plan is. How familiar are you with the document, Mr. Opara, and what are some of the key highlights? Mr. Opara, can you hear me?
Again, you're talking, okay, you're referring to myself?
Yes, Mr. Opara, sir. I'm asking how familiar you are with the document and what are some of the highlights?
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me clearly.
Yes, yes, we are. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So the National Action Plan for the promotion and protection of human rights in Nigeria is a government document assisted in its production by the National Human Rights Commission. Now, it's a policy document that streamlines implementation of human rights across the board. You know, it takes close to about 4 years before review. In other words, it's a benchmark that will be able to hold governments to account in the implementation of and promotion of human rights. It's not something new. It's a United Nations recommendation for all states to establish National Human Rights Commission 1, and again to also develop a national action plan that spans for at least 4 years before review for the promotion and protection of human rights. And so the National Human Rights Commission was the engine room that facilitated the development of this national action plan and submitted to government. It's been there for close to the commissioner has been working on it for about 4 years now, over 4 years. and it covers all spectrum of government establishments, from issues of health, issues of education, environment,
women and children, a whole lot.
Affairs.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I took a second to go through some of the key highlights. So my next question to you would be that this is not the first national action plan. There was one that expired in 2013. Do you think much was learned from that one that is shaping this new plan?
Well, you know, the National Action Plan is a document that is a continuum, is a process. You know, every day human rights issues occur, and therefore it requires review from time to time. And so between that period and this 2020, of developments in the human rights sector, and these are incorporated now into a document that is now that government has taken as a policy for implementation that will span between 2022 and 2026. So after 2026, it will be subject for review again. It's a continuum. It's a continuum. In every year, every 4 years, cycle is reviewed, and new things are brought in as society is dynamic. So also the issues of human rights. And of course, you know that in this country, there are so many issues that are arising. The issue of kidnapping, herdsmen, farmers' clashes were not there as prominent as it were when the document was being developed, as you referred, in 2013. So they are being incorporated now to update for government to incorporate as a policy, and that has been accepted by the government and is good for Nigeria.
All right, Mr. Festus Ogun, initially I said Ogun, my apologies for the mispronunciation of your name. Festus, if I may come to you now, as a human rights lawyer, what's your perspective? The government, the document it's set to present an opportunity for identifying and agreeing on areas of cooperation between the government departments, the private sector, civil society organizations in general, all stakeholders, to improve the monitoring and protection of human rights in the country. Mr. Opara has also highlighted that this is its core responsibility. But how does the document, this presentation, accomplish all of this, promoting and protecting human rights?
Thank you very much. I honestly feel that the government of Nigeria under President Muhammadu Buhari is just waking up from its dangerous slumber. And I'm saying this because, like it has been rightly mentioned, that indeed the last action plan expired in 2013. The question that follows, therefore, is that why did the government of Nigeria just made a new one in 2023 after it has spent about 8 years in power? See, I do not, while it is noble that we have an action plan in line with international best practices, I honestly believe that what has been lacking without the action plan is the will on the part of the leadership of our country to respect the sacred human rights of our people. The government of today is notorious for violating human rights. The records are there, they are bound.
Yeah, I think we'll come to, a deeper analysis of, the content and how it's been implemented. But what I'm asking is, how does this document guide the process of protecting human rights in the country? Let's look at it from maybe an academic point of view.
It's a policy document, right? It's a policy document. and its purpose is to guide the authorities, government agencies, security agencies, businesses, and all stakeholders in issues relating to human rights, advancement of human rights, protection of human rights, and the rest of it. Okay. So the point, therefore, which I intended to make, which I think is very important,
go ahead,
is that you see beyond this very policy, we have laws, we have regulations. They have not been respected. So how are we sure that this very guideline, this very policy, would help in ensuring that the sacred human rights of our people are guaranteed and protected?
You certainly don't. You don't seem to hold a lot of in stock for the policy that was just approved. Now, let me come to you, Steve. In a working scenario, what would be the benefits of having such a plan? Let's say this is an El Dorado environment where everything works. What would be the benefits that we'll see from it?
All right, thank you very much. And many thanks for adding that caveat in a working scenario, which is more or less an admission that Nigeria is not necessarily that El Dorado that we are looking forward to. But to answer your question, I think it will help the government understand its constitutional obligations, more especially with regards to respect for rule of law. Like my learned brother rightfully said, this government is notorious for flouting court orders. I mean, people whose rights are violated go to courts, challenge infringement of their rights, and obtain judgment against the state. What does the state do? Just roughshod of the courts, and nobody respects it, and there are no consequences. Examples are legion. I don't want to belabor the public by mentioning specific cases where the Buhari administration has blatantly and brazenly refused to obey court orders. Then what would this document also do? It would also enable the government to understand its international obligations, right? Nigeria is a signatory to various United Nations treaties on respect of human rights. This would help them understand better what those treaties, what those documents, what those instruments actually expect from them. It would also help them to understand what has been done and establish what steps the government has been able to take, how far it has been able to go with regards to respect of human rights. It would also help in policy formulation, legislation. I personally think that we have a plethora of legislation. Legislation is not the problem. What has been lacking is the political will to actually implement some of the provisions of these legal instruments. And then it would also help the government understand administrative steps that it has taken. What are the further challenges that he has faced or he continues to face towards the implementation of some of the provisions of these instruments? It would also help in addressing some of these challenges. It would help in evaluation and monitoring, and above all, self-introspection. The government should be self-critical of its implementation of some of the provisions of these instruments. So I think that is what the NAP in a working environment would achieve.
Okay, I was actually hoping that these objectives will be highlighted, because in the second part of this conversation, I hope for us to explore and see whether some of those guidelines have already been implemented. But let's look at the statement announcing the approval from the Federal Executive Council. Mr. Malami said the approval followed the administration, that's President Muhammadu Buhari's administration's compliance with the National Human Rights Commission judgment and payment of 135 million naira compensation to victims and families of the Apo 6 killings. In light of what we know about the case, do you agree that justice was served? I'll send this question to Festus, please. Festus, can you hear me? Okay, I think we lost Festus. So I'll take this question then to Lambert.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think there is a mix-up here. There is APO 6, the 6 victims of bloody action of the police.
Killing.
Where six young people were killed, including a girl. That's quite different from another APO 4, but I think there's a mix-up because this one, the APO 4 is the one that I know that compensation was paid by government. 135 million naira was paid to the victims' families. That was when the DSS stormed a particular building in APO, and where several people were killed, and the report was sent. The complaint was sent to the National Human Rights Commission, and acting on the powers conferred to it by the National Human Rights Act of 1995 as amended, the commission investigated this case and found the DSS culpable, and then compensations were recommended for the victims' families. And that was the one. I think it's been mixed up here.
Obviously, it is, because your comment pushed me to quickly check some of the media reports that I checked earlier. Premium Times reports and a direct quote saying that the judgment was awarded for the APO 6 killings. That's 135. So it seems that the AGF himself might be messing up the situation. But be that as it may, whether it is the APO 4 or the APO 6, right? 135 million naira was paid for. I mean, we will have to explore the validity of that. I mean, which of them it is, because there are different issues. But would you say that amount, despite the years that has gone by, is a clear indication that justice was served in that case? Because it is a recommendation from the National Human Rights Commission.
Come again briefly, please. I was interrupted a little.
Okay, I'm saying that I just clarified that the APO 6 was referenced by the AGF, as reported by Premium Times and other media outlets, that 135 million was paid. But you were saying there's a possibility that there is a mix-up from the office of the AGF. So my question is, be that as it may, there were killings, there were issues that has to do with unfair treatment of people, and the National Human Rights Commission made a recommendation. My asking is, was justice done by the payment of this compensation, barring all other issues around whether it is APO 6 or APO 4?
Well, you cannot quantify life in terms of naira and kobo.
Okay, I think the network is impacting our interaction with Mr. Opara. So I'll come to you, Steve, if you can hear me. Did you get the question that I put to Lambert?
Yes, I got your question clearly. Okay.
Please just take it on, sir.
All right, very well. First of all, I don't think you can quantify a human life with any amount of money. So putting it in perspective, and taking cognizance of the fact that the mastermind of this whole thing is still working freely. He has even gotten a promotion, got all his arrears of salaries, which were delayed as a result of the case, paid. I don't think that would reflect justice. What will reflect justice is the government demonstrating immense political will by clamping down on all the culprits in the events that committed the murder of these young people, clamping down on them and charting a new course for the implementation of human rights, the National Action Plan on Human Rights. So that would mean justice. That is what would mean justice for these persons. not necessarily the material contribution or the monetary payment that will go a long way in assuaging the feelings of the people they left behind. But in the long run, the government has to take this as a test case for implementing human rights going forward. That is what I expect to be justice in the circumstances.
Okay, let's look at something else that was highlighted by the AGF. I think we really need to clarify from the office of the AGF if he meant APO 4 or APO 6. But let's look at his statement about the report of the Committee for the Protection of Journalists. He said that they are judged that Nigeria is the only African country that has been in full compliance in terms of a protection of the rights of journalists. To your knowledge, is he correct? Because we hear stories of sometimes arrest, harassment of journalists, but here he says the protection of the rights of journalists is the only African country. What's your opinion?
Well, I don't think the Honorable Attorney General is saying the truth here. I have a report from the Sahara Reporters which quoted that as at 2017, about eight journalists have died under this administration. And I will specifically mention 4 names. One of them is one Ikechukwu Onumbogo, who was a cameraman for Anambra Broadcasting Service. There's also the case of one Lawrence Okoji of the NTA in Edo State, then a desk editor with Glory FM in Bayelsa State, and one famous Giobaro, a freelance broadcaster in Ekiti State. Instances abound of journalists, being hounded for trying to report events as they occur in real time. So I wouldn't agree with the Honorable Attorney General. I think because the administration of Major General Muhammadu Buhari, since it's winding down to its last few days, of course, you are going to see a lot of these PR attempts from people trying to put the administration in good light. But we all know the truth. I wouldn't want to belabor the public necessarily with the facts and details of some of these things that we know that are in public domain. But to say that no journalist lost his or her life in the 8 years of the administration of General Muhammadu Buhari would be with the greatest respect being disingenuous. That's all I can say on that.
All right, we need to take a short break. When we come back, I have a question for Lambert of that statement as well. Before we go to explore the MPA a little further, NAP, I beg your pardon, National Action Plan, a little further after now. Good to know you're still with us. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the approval of the 2022-2026 Action Plan for the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights approved by the Nigerian government. I still have with me Lambert Opara. He's a former director at the National Human Rights Commission. He joins us from Abuja. We also have Festus Ogun, human rights lawyer from Lagos, and Steve Nwabeze, senior associate, Pitchstone and Grace LP, also here in Lagos. So before we went on that break, I did mention that I want to speak to Lambert about something that the AGF said. He is quoted as saying that the administration of Buhari has established a record of being the only administration in the history of Nigeria that has, indeed, some say this is a bit condescending, enforced, tolerated, accommodated, and enforced the decision of the Human Rights Commission. Just to fact check. Okay, I understand Lambert is off. I will send a question to Festus now. Just to fact check, to your knowledge, how true is this that the Buhari's administration is the one that has enforced the decision of the Human Rights Commission? Festus, your audio is off. If you can just press on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, well, it is not factually accurate that the government of President Muhammadu Buhari has been the, government that has enforced the decision of the African Commission on Human Rights the most. And how many Nigerians approach the African Commission on Human Rights? How many Nigerians? How many Nigerians approach the ECOWAS court itself? How many Nigerians? The proper question is, if we are to look at the dossier of human rights violation or, human rights management of the administration, let's ask the question, how many of our court orders have been obeyed, respected by the present government? It has gotten to a state that the decisions of our courts are no longer respected, especially when it comes to human rights, by the government of the day. It is so worse that the same government that is claiming to have protected human rights recorded the greatest human rights abuse in the history of our country on October 2020. Till today, while the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is saying today, they have been implementing, reports and all of that, has the NHRC report been implemented by the government of President Muhammadu Buhari? Looking at the brazen human rights violation that occurred during this period, accumulated by the human rights violations that brought about the NHRC protest itself. How many recommendations by the panels have been implemented completely in this country? How many of the victims have been compensated? The same government of Nigeria is still saying to today that there was no massacre. It's still saying that there was no brazen human rights violation. Yet, what happened before our very eyes, the government of Nigeria is saying that they have managed the human rights situation well. That is not true.
From your submission, actually, your submission makes my next question mute, because basically the AGF did say that the essence of the presentation of the NAP to the council was for onward presentation, if I can get it now, to the international, International Human Rights Committee, and the point is to upscale from looking at the local scale of, in terms of observance of the promotion of human rights, to go to the international observance of best practices. So that point is mute. But for clarity, I'll take this question to Steve. In your experienced position, is Nigeria really on track with protecting? Let's be fair. We know that there are some inaccuracies in some of the things that the AGF has said based off of your responses to my questions. But in fairness, would you say Nigeria has complied to at least the local level to some extent of observing human rights?
Well, what I can assure the public is that the judiciary, to a reasonable extent, has done remarkably well in protecting human rights. There are many instances where the government brazenly flouts or infringes on the rights of people who approach the courts for redress and were able to get judgment. That is commendable. I will take you to two notable decisions on extrajudicial killings. One of them is the case of Adewey against the state. It was a decision that was given by the Supreme Court in 2017, where a police officer who was a corporal masterminded the arrest and subsequent killing of a suspect who was accused of threatening the life of the petitioner. So what happened was that somebody wrote a petition alleging threats to life, and the police swung into action, made a couple of arrests. Then one of the arrested persons reportedly tried to flee from the police, and the appellants shot at him. Of course, the readily available defense was that it was an accidental discharge. The matter was argued up to, he was convicted by the court of first instance. The conviction was affirmed by the Court of Appeal and then reaffirmed again by the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court reduced the conviction from, or reviewed the conviction from murder to manslaughter, and then convicted him for, sentenced him to 10 years imprisonment with hard labor. So then there's another decision in 2007, also involving a police officer, this time a sergeant, who had approached the home of a suspect who was reportedly an armed robber and tried to make an arrest. Of course, the suspect didn't open the door because it was 2 a.m. in the morning. So this particular sergeant went through the window of the suspect and shot inside the apartment and unfortunately killed the person. Okay. The sergeant was convicted again and sentenced to death by hanging. So what I'm saying is that, yes, on a domestic scale, and as borne out by decisions of the courts, the court has been very forthright in defending the rights of citizens. What has been lacking is the domestic will, the political will on the part of the government to respect court orders, to encourage the judiciary, and to more or less decongest the docket of the court, because most of the times some of these cases can span up to a decade or more in courts before getting any sort of determination by the court. So on a domestic level, yes, I would say that there has been a progress, not too significant progress. There has been progress nonetheless. Okay. But I wouldn't say that that progress has transcended to the extent where I would say that yes, that with the government thumbs up, that yes, that the government has really improved drastically when it comes to promotion and enhancement of.
All right, let's bring in Lambert and see how long his network will hold. I want to ask you something that Steve highlighted earlier. 3 broad areas that the National Action Plan expects from government. The first is to assess the current measures in place to promote and protect human rights. The question I want to ask you, Lambert, is what is your assessment of the current measures across the country? Lambert, did you get my question? Okay, so we're having a real challenge with the network today. I crave your indulgence, but this is an important conversation. Festus, are you there? Okay, so I'll put the question to you, Steve. You actually highlighted these areas. So what would be your assessment of the current measures that are already in place? Steve, can you get me? Okay, I think we also seem to have lost Steve. For those that are just tuning in, this is Village Square Africa. We're looking at the National Action Plan recently promoted by the Nigerian, approved by the Nigeria's Federal Executive Council for the promotion and protection of human rights in Nigeria. My guests so far, they've been sharing their thoughts and a lot of skepticisms, really. Something about from Festus was that beyond the policies that is being promulgated, we have this one now. Nigeria does not have a problem with laws. What we have is a problem with implementation and the political will to carry through. Steve even said that the courts are making efforts, but on the part of government, which seems to contradict what the AGF, that's the Attorney General of the Federation of Nigeria, is saying, that the government has done very well, and they want to scale up from the local level to international level. Let me see if we have Festus. Festus, do we have your attention again?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that the network will stay with us. I wanted you to just talk on the broad areas that government is supposed to take action on. And one of them is the assessment of the current measures that we already have in place to protect human rights? What's the level of compliance to some of these measures that we already have if we are to look at the import of the National Action Plan?
I'll be very honest with you. Since I was called to the Nigerian bar, the larger part of my practice has been on human rights. I'll be very sincere with you that we have fine policies, fine laws, fine regulations that have protected and guaranteed human rights. The fundamental challenge is that those who should ordinarily see to the implementation of these policies are the violators of the same policies. And this now brings to question that can the government of the day honestly make a review of the current human rights crisis that we have in the country? That is the fundamental challenge. Because once the leadership of our country begins to lie to itself, just like the Honorable Attorney General has done, to say, well, we have done fantastically well in the areas of human rights, then there will not be an honest, clear, and sincere review of the current situation and the past, dossier of human rights violations in Nigeria. If I tell you today that we have a lot of our people who have been arrested, who have been tortured, in fact, despite court orders, who have not been released by security agencies across the country. There is a particular man named Emeka Ngonadi. He was arrested sometime in April 2021. He was traveling to the east. He was taken to Abuja at the SSS headquarters. We went to court. We got judgment. I personally handled the case. I got judgment against the SSS. The court ordered that Mr. Emeka Ngonadi should be released from the SSS custody. Up to this moment, the government of Nigeria has not released Mr. Ngonadi.
The core of your submission, Festus, the core of your submission through the duration of this conversation is the fact that government is failing woefully in complying with rulings that would uphold human rights that they are touting to promote.
Absolutely.
So let's look at another aspect.
One more point I think I want to make, which is very important, is that the government of Nigeria seem to satisfy or seem to prefer satisfying the requirements of international bodies and organizations in place of actual protection, promotion, and guaranteeing of human rights in Nigeria. Yes, we can have all of these policies as required by international, agreements and international collaboration and diplomacy. We can have it in the country. But in reality, what is the situation on ground? That is my concern as a citizen of Nigeria and a legal practitioner. That's my concern.
All right. I'll take the next question to Steve. I'm told we have less than 5 minutes. The second area, broad area that the National Action Plan is supposed to help government address is to identify areas that need improvement. There is a lot of areas. But from your experience, what areas can the government put in a little more effort for the citizenry to notice, measurable improvements?
All right. I will take the courts. I mentioned, allude to the fact there's an increasingly an expanding docket of the courts these days. Cases that are usually, that should ordinarily take less than 6 months will take almost 4 years to complete. Traditionally, when you file a fundamental rights enforcement action, which is usually the expeditious way of trying to get access to justice, between 3 to 4 months, ideally. So if we follow the FREP rules, which prioritizes the enforcement of rights action filed by citizens, most of these cases can be determined within a time span of 6 months. But what do you have? You file your application for enforcement of fundamental rights. You file your affidavit of urgency, trying to underscore the facts that there are exceptional circumstances which make it imperative for the court to hear your application and determine the issues expeditiously. You don't even get the matter assigned to court 2 months after you have filed. This is an experience I've had throughout my practice, at least, and it has become more pronounced in the last 4 to 6 years. So you begin to wonder exactly what the administrative judge, who is supposed to look at the papers and say, oh, this is urgent, let me assign this to a judge that will hear it expeditiously. You file these cases 2 months, the person is languishing in prison. So there's no access to courts. I would like the judge, the government to wade into the matter by either probably appointing more judges or creating specialist courts for enforcement of fundamental rights cases. I mean, these cases should no longer be dogged by the protracted delays associated with normal cases. So I would like the government to increase access to justice. Yes.
Access to justice, very important. I mean, there's so many talking points already, but we have to wrap up. So I'll put this question to you, Lambert. If you were to predict in what areas do you foresee this document impacting human rights in the twilight of 2026 when its tenure comes to an end? I mean, you earlier talked about the fact that there were some aspects that is there that wasn't there before. Boko Haram and some other insurgency, fighting insurgency, kidnapping and banditry and all of that. What do you expect to see this document accomplish by its twilight of 2026?
Thank you very much. Well, the point that is this. This is a policy document. It's not an end itself. It's a process. The most important thing now is that we have a document of international standard that we can hold government to account. It is also important that you have this document that you could use as a weapon to confront those who are violating human rights, especially government officials, because government is the greatest violator of human rights. I look forward to strengthening capacities of human rights institutions that promote and protect human rights, like the judiciary has been mentioned. Of course, institutions like the National Human Rights Commission must be strengthened in its capacity to be able to carry out its functions as an international body that could assist government promote and protect human rights. We should be happy that we have such a document. Before now, we never had. And I think it is a starting point. Yes, it's not been rosy when it has to do with human rights in promotion and protection in Nigeria. But right now, as it is, at least we can be rest assured that, yes, we are beginning to have a ray of hope that we will get there. It's a continuum, it's a continuous process.
I think I'll take it off from your submission that this is a ray of hope. When it comes to helping promote and protect human rights in Nigeria. I want to say thank you very much, Lambert Opara, former director at the National Human Rights Commission, for speaking with us all the way from Abuja. Festus Ogun, human rights lawyer, thank you very much for your time as well. And Steve Nwabweze, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you for giving us your time.
My pleasure.
All right, dear viewer, that's where we will rise from the square today. I thank you for your kind attention. Until next time, please be well.